Hello everyone, happy Wednesday, and thank you for tuning in to MindMine TV, into our main show every Wednesday, where we talk about left brain and right brain topics, where they intersect, and how they impact your life. And again, once again, it's always a conversation, so thank you for joining us, and thank you in advance for your engagement in chat.
Indeed, and this is the last day of February.
February 28th.
Isn't it, right? Not a leap year, I don't believe. Hard to keep track of days sometimes. What day is it in the week? What day is it in the month? But yeah, it's a short month. I just remember yesterday it was February 1st, and now we're at the end. Wow. Time really does fly the older you get. This is what I found. This is a true statement. Someone told me that one time when I was much, much younger. I was like, nah. I'm like, you just have more stuff to do. And they're like, yeah, but it also just, it literally goes by faster. We don't know why. We don't know why. And I found that is a true statement. So thank you, whoever it was. I don't remember who said it to me, but they did say it.
Well, and eventually here is going to be TwitchCon 2018 already, which they just announced that, by the way. For those of you interested in joining, it is a very fun event, and I think it's just going to get better, hopefully, with time. We had it actually last year at the Long Beach Convention Center in California, and now it's going to be moved actually to, what was it, San Jose? San Jose.
Silicon Valley, everybody.
Yeah, so just south of San Francisco. So about 6 hours north of Los Angeles, for those of you in the maybe semi-familiar with the California area, but not completely. But yeah, it is going to be a very fun experience. So if you are a streamer, you just love Twitch, hardcore video gamer, or streamer overall about all topics, then you'll definitely want to make sure to attend. It's going to be a lot of fun. They did a great job. I think this past year, in 2017, there was, some growing pains. A few things are still working out. But I'm hopeful that they'll take that feedback and really do a great job this year.
Yes, and this will be, I think, their fourth year upcoming in 2018. So I'm excited to see what else they have in store. We didn't get to go to the first two that they had, the first two TwitchCons, but we did go last year, and it was a blast.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, if you plan on attending, please let us know. We'd love to meet up with you in person and chat more about games and Twitch and all the different topics that we talk here about on our main show. We love to talk with you in person about them, so please let us know. I'd be happy to meet up with you and see what we can get sparked and get going.
And hello, everybody in chat. How is everybody doing today? Vargala has a great point. Why time flies faster when you're older. It's because the time is percentage-wise, it's less and less equal to your age. So for example, a year to a 2-year-old is 50% of their life, versus when you're older, say 40 or 50. That makes sense. So time is a thing. Time is a thing. They say time heals all wounds and whatnot and whatever else. But yeah, the perception of time, that would be an interesting topic for another show, because I am fascinated by it. I mean, we've always heard, time goes by faster when you're having fun and much slower when you're not. And it is interesting how our perception of moving through this time dimension, if you will, is really affected by the activities that we're doing, how we have our attention towards something, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, too, for folks listening on Podbean or on iTunes, thank you very much for joining us again. This gets released live on Twitch every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and otherwise gets to your eardrums on Podbean and iTunes every Monday morning. So thank you so very much. And if you want to see us live again, make sure to jump into Twitch and let us know your thoughts. Share them live on the air, if you will, here on our live stream.
And that's at twitch.tv/MindMineTV. So come check us out. All right, so today we're going to have an awesome discussion with you guys. Our 4 topics include children and iPads. I know you're super excited to see how these two things connect.
It's the automatic babysitter, right? That's what the iPad is. That's what I've seen it as.
I believe that is what some parents use it as, which is totally fine. That's totally fine. If I had an iPad, I could just give it to my cats when they're hungry and be like, here, order yourself some food, all right? Just leave me alone. Like, I might use it, so.
If they had a cat Grubhub, oh, man.
Oh, cat Grubhub. Ooh, there's a niche. There's a delivery system that I think would work out for, just pet food, pet things, right? Things that you run out with. Our second topic is going to be about a YouTube conspiracy to keep you on their site longer. Conspiracies. I know I got your attention on that one, right? Next, we're going to talk about how writers terrify their readers. Some writers, not all. Just the ones who write horror.
That's right. Exactly right. Yeah, I mean, again, unless it's bad writing, most authors don't terrify me unless they're specifically trying to do it. So if I read 50 Shades, was it 50 Shades, 40 Shades? I don't know what the hell it is. Some number of shades of gray. I would be terrified just because of the writing. I would say even Twilight's better, and that still terrifies me. So there you go.
But then it's like terrifying / entertaining and humorous at the same time. The bad writing, I would say.
That's true. At least you can laugh at it. Right. At that point, it's just kind of like a horror movie, one of those bad ones where you're like, you know what? I'm actually voting for the villain on this one. Kill that little bastard. Just take him out. Choke him with a cordless phone. I don't care.
Oh, dear. And then the last thing that we're going to be talking about is how AI is changing the future of journalism. Probably. Quite likely.
It is. It is already. Yeah.
It's already been happening.
Talk to the Washington Post. They'll tell you. And we'll tell you more.
So stay tuned. We have an awesome show for you guys today.
And welcome in chat Vargalis Vet, Anna Kronos BG, Jeopard, Jordan Shep, RX Mongo, and so many more. Thank you for those chatting already or who are working and lurking with us. We really do appreciate it. So thank you so much for joining us today. And hello, Aries 2201. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us. So for our first topic today, talking about children and technology. Again, our main focus here comes from the Telegraph, where they mention children struggle to hold pens because of excessive use of iPads, experts claim. Now, this shouldn't be too much of a surprise in the sense of the article coming out, as articles have been coming out since 2012 about how does technology impact our skills when it comes to writing, or our spatial skills, or just musculature in the hands and the shoulders and whatnot, because we're gripping less things, right? We're using less of our muscles, less of our upper body to engage in daily activities because of technology. And you could find articles going back to even 2012 diving into the effects of keyboards on our physical bodies. So it's been very interesting to kind of read through this. And the main focus of this topic is that many pediatric doctors and handwriting experts and even orthopedic therapists warn that although kids can swipe a screen, they no longer have the hand strength and agility to learn to write correctly when they start school. And Sally Payne, who's the head pediatric occupational therapist at Heart of England Foundation NHS Trust, says that to be able to grip a pencil and move it, you need strong control of the fine muscles in your fingers. But because of this technology, these aren't getting developed, because what we're seeing is more electronics being introduced at even younger ages, even as early as the age of 2. And actually, a recent study did find that 58% of children under the age of 2 even had already used a tablet or mobile phone. Again, going back to that joke about them becoming babysitters, these devices. And many nurseries actually have installed interactive smart boards, digital cameras, and touchscreen computers to try to expose children to gadgets at an early age. Now, ideally, their goal here is to try to get basically children on the edge of where everything's going, right? They're trying to get them acclimated to technology, have them better understand it, so as they grow up, they can make, I guess, more fluid adjustments into this society that we're going into of a very tech-heavy sort of environment. Now, of course, so the problem is that we're seeing, well, less creativity overall being used in the sense of you're not drawing, you're not painting, you're not sculpting things, because a lot of stuff is being done just with a simple finger swipe, for example, on a touchpad or with a mouse click even. And what they're saying, too, is that it actually impacts us on a cognitive level, too, because, again, that's less focus that you're putting into the words that you're supposedly writing out or the drawings that you're drawing or painting, because everything is so much more simplified with technology. So you're not, again, getting these kind of what seem to be core human foundational elements in place. And so what we're seeing is children lacking in many of these different areas, but including in their muscles, which is, I guess, in some ways it's surprising, but in other ways it shouldn't be, right? Because we as older individuals, as adults, ideally 18 plus, have heard or seen of people constantly getting carpal tunnel syndrome or other wrist issues because of using a keyboard or using a mouse. And so now all of a sudden they're pushing all these ergonomic items out there on the market to help better adjust. So that way you're sitting properly. So that way, you know, your wrists aren't getting all the tension or pressure that they would normally. And so we've already been seeing these types of issues on a long-term scale or short-term scale, depending on how much you use the technology. And so it really shouldn't be that surprising overall that it's impacting children, especially under the age of 2, where that's when they're trying to develop. They're not even fully developed, is I guess my point here, that we're seeing fully developed people already having issues with technology physically, that seeing people who are not fully developed yet, it shouldn't be a big surprise. But I mean, what are your thoughts on this thus far?
Oh yeah, no, exactly, kind of what you're saying, and obviously every generation is going to have some technology that, you know, radically changes their life, their lifestyle, everything, right? I mean, you know, how many people are chiseling words into stone tablets right now to write, right? Like,
oh yeah,
not that many, if any. So, you know, technological advancements, they're great. You know, they make our lives easier. They make us live longer. Everything is more convenient. It's wonderful. We have plumbing, indoor plumbing. It's amazing. And, but we have to be careful, obviously, in introducing some of this technology so early on to our children. And there's the over-reliance that I think we have on technology in all areas of our life, at all ages, in all industries, in ways, you know, it's not that great. Right. Because by making things, I guess, too easy, right? We don't work our bodies the way they're meant to, like sitting all day. You know, we're supposed to be out there moving our muscles. So what do? We sit all day, 9 to 5 at a desk. We look at a monitor. Sometimes we forget to blink and our eyes hurt after a while. And then we're like, oh, we have to go to the gym and get our workout in. And it's like, well, maybe if we built the gym part, you know, in our daily lives as we're doing something else, we wouldn't need to then, you know, kind of cram it all together in an hour, run over there, get all sweaty and then come back, you know, kind of a thing. And so the same thing with the, you know, introducing these smart boards and these tablets and these phones so early on in a child's development, instead of, you know, letting them walk around, explore the world, touch things, put them in their mouth, you know, throw them, bite them, you know, do the things that kids do to actually fully explore the world and get their muscles working. You know, that's a detriment to their growth. And I would say even things like language, right? Like, there's obviously examples where if a child is exposed to multiple languages when they're younger, they have a linguistic dexterity of being able to speak multiple languages when they grow up. So it's the same thing now that we're seeing in reverse. You know, if we're just showing them a screen that has no 3D dimension, they're just swiping or tapping or doing something like that, we're limiting their exposure to physical dexterity. And that's I don't know what that future will look like for them. And maybe in the future, we will never have to pick up a pen and write down something on a piece of paper because paper will be obsolete. Pens won't exist. Everything is done with the mind and we're telepathically talking to each other and communicating. So great. All right. Teach the kids that. But right now, that's still a thing that we're doing.
Well, and even then, too, I mean, our bodies are meant to move. They're meant to lift. They're meant to maneuver through different spaces and experience different things and not just sit there as a pedestal for your brain.
A pedestal for your brain.
And I feel like that's what's becoming more of, is that the body is now just becoming a pedestal to hold your brain up. And that's it. And Vergala has a great point, just brains in jars. If you've ever seen The Simpsons or some of those other cartoons where it's just people's heads in jars and that's all they need, right? And I think we're getting to that point in a way where it's just we forget that there's the rest of our body that we have to take care of.
That's a good point.
And that it does need these things. It really does, because that's what it's meant to do. That's how we evolved and adapted. And we've gotten to the point where we're really not evolving or adapting too much more. We're really kind of, at our current peak, I guess, in a way. And everything's now advancing faster than we are. And we have to keep that in mind and know that, okay, yes, technology is here, but also, too, a lot of technology is being pushed on us because it sells. A lot of technology is being pushed onto us because they're like, oh, well, we can make money. But that doesn't mean that it's been looked into long enough for certain technologies where it should be implemented, or it should be implemented to all ages. And I think that's something to think about, too, is that those barriers or those obstacles that are supposed to be in place to help protect us aren't always there. Because, again, most companies, businesses, and federal agencies look at dollar amount, and they also look at, our systems are old, but we're not going to change it because it's worked thus far. And so, therefore, it hasn't adapted to include what will the long-term impact of certain technologies be, and why... I guess, and why is it being implemented at certain ages? Why do they need that actually? I think people are just well, this is hot and this is what's going on, so this is what we just need to do. And then we learn from it the hard way.
That's because Silicon Valley tells us, you gotta do this, you gotta buy it. If you don't buy it, you're not cool.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think that we're also pushing this onto children too. I get the fact that, right, I want to give children a better future than what I had, and ideally that's kind of gets passed down each generation. Is all right, we had this, we know how to improve it, let's go that route. But a lot of these things too, like certain technologies, again, not all technology, but certain technologies haven't even really been proven to give a true benefit. It's more of an aesthetic, or as we said, that cool factor. Well, why are we trying to push these cool factors onto children that don't even understand what the thing is in front of them? You know what I mean? And they don't understand that concept outside of the device of that, well, it's the cool factor because it's made by Apple or whatever. And, unfortunately, we're pushing, I think, some of the wrong things onto these kids at this point then. We should let them explore. We should let them play. Now, again, I think technology has its place. We talked about in December about health concerns being brought up from those who use VR at a very early age. Mm-hmm. They said that the children became discombobulated, that their sense of depth and everything else was thrown off. And again, as they're developing. So we're not saying that, VR is bad for everyone, though long-term use, there could be implications. But what we're saying is that certain ages, as you're developing, you put in these altering experiences by technology, and it's going to warp their sense of reality. It's going to warp their sense of balance and everything else. And so it becomes more of a detriment. There can be ways of VR and technology like this where it's okay, I don't have the opportunity to go to Rome to see the Colosseums, but I can do a virtual tour, right? I can go through a website and learn everything about it and see images of it and at least get a sense of it. So in that way, it's powerful. But in other ways, especially just to keep children busy, I think that's, I guess, not unprofessional, but it's just inappropriate in a way. It's not really benefiting the child at that point.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. we all obviously want the best for our children. We want them to have an easier childhood and a better future than even we have. But I think a lot of people, unfortunately, tend to look at things short term. I want to make it easy and great for my kid right now.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily think about, but how is this going to impact them long term? And that's fair to say. I mean, I do lots of things that make my life easy now. And then later it's like, damn it, I should have thought about this better, you know? And Anna Cross BG in our chat actually brings up a good point. People are lazy. You know, that's why we build machines to help ourselves out. But the paradox is that machines make people more lazy and less effective. So technology only kind of really helps us 50% of the time. and again, right, it depends on what that technology is. My car is my freedom. It gets me from point A to point B. It helps me accomplish everything that I want to accomplish that I can with a car. And it's freedom. If I didn't have a car, life would be significantly harder, especially in SoCal. But at the same time, if I maybe just had a bike, that would probably be a way better workout for my body, for my well-being. But it's not super practical, you know, if you're trying to do other things. So like we say with most everything that we talk about, technology, the advancement of technology, and a lot of the topics that we talk about in general, you know, there is no right or wrong answer. It isn't all bad or all good. It really just depends on the choices that you yourself as an individual make, the choices that governments make, whole cultures, and how we utilize the tools that we're given. And that we're careful not to go too far in one direction. I mean, my opinion, little kids, they don't need to be on a phone. I cringe when I'm, you know, walking somewhere and the child has the parent's phone in their hand and they're like texting or playing a game or something, and I'm like take this moment to interact with your child. Like,
yeah, actually talk to them and show that you care. Right?
Meanwhile, they're just gonna grow up and be another sad, lonely, isolated person who doesn't necessarily know how to interact with people, and they'll get that self-validation only through this in front of their face. So
well, and to go off of that too, to kind of hit the other end of it too, we have mentioned as well that technology can be a great thing for those that suffer from anxiety or depression or other disabilities where they cannot get out into the world. And so the way that they connect would be through technology, through looking at a computer or a phone or a tablet. So there are benefits depending on the individual. And I think that's really one of the keys, is to make sure that we understand that in the long run, okay, if this stuff is getting pushed out like it is, it's on us then. We need to know how to properly use the things being pushed out and not just constantly consume it and use it as well. I think, you know, it's not only the people who are implementing it unsafely without really testing it and knowing the factors is part of the problem, but also the people just consuming it without asking any questions like we are here today, or bringing up any vital information or researching it to go, is this really good for my child? And that's the other factor too. And so I think that we need to be better at asking questions and looking into this and going, you know, am I being over reliant on a piece of technology as well? Or am I being over reliant on my child using the technology so I don't have to interact with the child? You know, I mean, there's that too, which is kind of ironic, because at that point it's like you're not over reliant on using the item, you're over reliant on someone else using it. And that seems interesting too. So, you know, again, I'd say just play it safe and don't, for your children's sake too. Like, I think certain technologies work well, you know, helping them to learn colors or numbers can be beneficial, but don't strip away every single physical action or physical event that they could potentially get into. Don't just glue a monitor in front of them and say they're good for the next 8 hours.
Oh, no, it's so sad.
So sad. And it's not like they're you and I either. Like, these are children, you know, they're still trying to figure out the world, figure out themselves. We have, at least at our age, potentially, hopefully, a little bit better grasp of what the hell we're doing here. Even if we know it feels like a windstorm and we're just getting bombarded around in this tin box. But, you know, at least we understand that, right? They still don't. So, it's up to us also to set the standards, not just give them a bunch of stuff and say, have at it. So, and I will say too, from another side as well, is that many of these articles that have been pushed out, most of the people they talk with are typically people, though, that are either educators in their 60s, 70s, 80s. Many of the people are also from like the National Association of Handwriting, which I didn't know was a thing, but it actually is.
Right. Calligraphy, man. It's making a comeback.
Yeah, right? So they're talking to these people, but I haven't seen many interviews where they spoke to someone who was on the complete other end, meaning all about technology, or somewhere in the middle where they're not really influenced by one side or the other. So that's something to think about. Again, I'm not saying or trying to diminish or water down what's being said here, because I absolutely do believe it. But I think it's also important to look at both sides and also understand that for a lot of these articles, again, they don't really seem to be questioning people outside of those who are already really attached to writing by hand and even cursive. There were a lot of articles about how just cursive was disappearing and how that is a negative effect because it benefits both sides of the brain, both the creative and the logical at the same time. But then again, do we still need cursive? What is the true purpose of cursive writing? And that's a whole other debate, but it's just something to think about as you look at information like this and whatnot, is always look at, did they ask the other side? Does this seem very much one-sided based on who they asked, whether intentional or not? Again, it's not saying this is intentional, but it's always good to question those things too.
Yeah, and I think, again, when an older generation or the previous generation looks at the new generation or future generations, they've got their own schema that they're working with, so if you're used to writing with a pen and a pencil on a piece of paper or something like that, and you see people growing up either not knowing how to do that, doing that poorly, or just not being taught, it kind of brings into question potentially your own schema, like, well, then why did I have to do that, right? Like, we're moving towards something where we don't need that anymore. And the way you might react to that is, one is, okay, great, well, then I don't have to do it anymore. Or two, wait a minute, if I had to do it, you have to do it. And, again, maybe future generations, the way that technology will change and shape our lives, maybe these kids will actually thrive better because of what will be available in the future for them. So it is hard to say, just because we're looking at them and like, oh, they're losing dexterity in their hands. It's like, okay, but why is that necessary? What kind of jobs will they have to do in the future where that would be required? Maybe they won't have to. So it's interesting. For sure. I mean, if everyone is going to be brains in jars, then you don't need manual dexterity because you won't have a hand. So why waste that space in your brain?
But who's going to clean the jar?
Well,
you got to dust the jar somehow, folks. I don't know what's gonna happen, but they're going to have arms. What the hell?
I will say, Alistair Reynolds is a sci-fi writer who has created an amazing universe with a lot of his book series. They all pretty much take place in the same universe, just, vastly different timelines. And one of his books actually talks, or I guess several, but one of them specifically talks about, there's all these planets where, or these like different pockets of civilization where they're all part of the same, kind of universe, unified planetary kind of thing. But people live in these enclaves where they're very specialized to that particular set of people. So for example, in one place, people don't actually want their arms and legs, so they literally have them surgically removed. They become part of this like enclave. I'm having trouble with that word. And they live out their lives literally just doing things with their brains, with their like little technology thingamabobbers. And then there's another society where people have rejected everything that's technological except for like the one implant that they need to like be able to vote in this unified planetary system. And they do everything like old school time, So, the future could go either way. And also, potentially, we could just see the beginning of really specialized niches of people. People who are really into calligraphy will pass that knowledge on down to this small, group of people. People who are not into that won't, and they'll specialize in something else. So I think that'll be interesting.
Oh, yeah.
I highly recommend Alistair Reynolds if anyone's interested in reading some of those books.
And also talking about interesting, we have some great comments in chat. Old Man Renz says, my wife and I write in cursive as code because our 12-year-old can't read it.
That's genius.
There you go. 10 points. Anachronos says, when we speak about freedom, we always miss one important thing. We are slaves, energy, food, and our free will. These three things are the base of our freedom. If we depend on some of them, then we are slaves on our will. And there you go. And then Vargala says, never understood why we have two written languages for English.
So that you can write in code so your kids can't read it. Or other kids, I guess. Other people's children.
Exactly. And Vargala also says, what about the space Amish? Are we going to see that? I want to see it. I want to see some space Amish. I want to see some flying carriages. Is that a potential?
Yeah, I think that's called steampunk.
Of course, the horses would all die unless you put like little suits on them and stuff.
It's robot horses.
It's robot horses.
That's just my answer for everything.
Oh, God. When in doubt,
Robots.
robot horses. There's pollution going on? Well, if it wasn't for the damn robot horses, it wouldn't be an issue, okay? We really need to do something. Call your representatives, okay? I have a petition online. I have a Facebook group, anti-robot horse group. Please join. Thank you.
Or if it's not robots, it's aliens. So
That's true, too.
You know that. And this brings us to actually our next topic quite nicely. So, as you might know, there's a lot of conspiracy theorists out there of a variety of things, right? Everything from aliens to government to the earth to the planet, the weather, everything. And a lot of these conspiracy theorists are now on YouTube because it's a free platform. You can easily upload a video. You can create the content that you want and you can put it up there. The thing is, there's a researcher out there who's saying that the YouTube's conspiracy video problem is getting worse. Jonathan Albright, he's a research director for the Tao Center for Digital Journalism at Columbia University. And he's been studying the misinformation on YouTube going back to the 2016 presidential election. And what he found was actually very interesting. He concluded that there's basically a vast network of conspiracy videos on YouTube that actually feeds off of tragic events as they happen, such as the recent shooting in Florida. So what surprised Albright, of course, wasn't that conspiracy videos existed. We all know, the internet has served as a convenient, easy to access platform for the paranoid to share their thoughts since its earliest days, right? And now they have an audience, and the audience can like and share and contribute. What surprised him was that the, of course, now Google-owned platform essentially creates a self-reinforcing network. And it only grows stronger when tragic events occur. And basically, the many thousands of conspiracy videos that are currently on YouTube, they're actively being pushed up by YouTube using their, up next video recommendations. And the up next suggestions, of course, are there to persuade users to stay on the site more and watch more videos, right? You're sort of kind of creating a little bit of an echo chamber for yourself. So Albright wrote, every time there's a mass shooting or terror event, due to the subsequent backlash, this YouTube conspiracy genre grows in size and economic value, right? Because those videos have ads running on them. The search and recommendation algorithms naturally ensure that these videos are connected and thus have more reach. So obviously, yes, right? YouTube wants to keep you, the user, on the site longer. So as soon as you finish viewing a video on the platform, they're going to show you a suggested list of other videos to watch based on their, super secret algorithm, of course. And the conspiracy network thrives because of that very algorithm. And when a user seeks out conspiracy theories, they're not only going to find the one video that they're watching, but they're going to find thousands more videos that reinforce exactly what they think is happening, or what that content that they're looking at is saying that is happening, right? But those videos, that content, it doesn't mean that it's true, right? Just because a lot of people say something doesn't make it true, right? Unless it is actually true. So, and as tech companies face growing criticism, over the content that they host, that they surface, that they distribute, they've become more willing to remove this misinformation or like extremist content, or at least limit the spread of it, right? Like, it's up there, but we're not going to share it out any more than we need to. And YouTube it's just one part of this broader problem of what's now kind of called fake news on the internet. The platform plays a central role because pretty much all roads lead back to YouTube, right? For example, YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, they all went under the radar for their role in spreading the disinformation around the 2016 US election. So, but Albright notes in his research, all these conspiracy theorists stuff always leads back to YouTube. And as you might have guessed, of course, YouTube did not respond to the request for comment on this particular article. But of course, this brings up a lot of points, right? Let's unpack some of them. Obviously, we like to surround ourselves with news and sources and information that matches or mirrors our belief system, our core values, and of course, our fears, right? Because who wants to watch something and be like, oh no, you were wrong this whole time? It's like, I'm not going to watch that. I'm going to watch something that says I'm right. So we already kind of have that natural sense about us. And when you're looking at a platform, an online site that has a lot of content, and then that site itself keeps pushing that same content, right? It's, where do they draw the line? Where do they have like a moral right, a legal right to limit the spread of that? When does that become censorship potentially? Because, businesses, again, as we've mentioned before, businesses need to stay in business, and their primary goal probably is to make money, not necessarily to look out for the well-being of their users. The government or, civic organizations in countries, their role, one would think, is to help the people and look out for them. So when we're looking at a business like YouTube, it's not like they're creating the content. It's not like they're putting out the fake information or the misinformation or things that may or may not be factual, but they do push it out based on this algorithm that they have. So, and then of course, nothing happens until something bad happens. And then, oh, whoops, yeah, we're going to take that down. We're going to look into it. We're going to remove this person. We're going to do some things. We're going to spin some PR. And then everyone's going to forget about it for a few months. And then we're going to go back right at it because we're a business and we want to make money. The other thing to unpack really is, why are people so paranoid? Like, I myself don't understand it. I don't know if it's a US trend, a thing. Is it global? I'd love to hear some thoughts.
Well, so to jump in on this, at least to kind of unpack the first section of it, which is YouTube censoring. Now, a lot of people will say, well, this is against my freedom of speech, right? Well, actually, if you look at freedom of speech, it doesn't infringe on it. The freedom of speech actually in the Constitution does state that the government does not have the right to detain you, to arrest you, or to basically invoke any sort of negative punishment or impact on you for voicing your opinion on the government. That does not mean that you have the freedom of speech, though, to say just whatever you want, wherever you want. And because our society is consumeristic, is about consumerism and selling and what have you, we get that pushed onto businesses in that sense of that, well, then they can do basically run their site the way they want to, right? So technically, YouTube, well, more than technically, legally, YouTube has the right to do whatever they want with their site and allow whoever they want on their site and to promote whoever they want on their site. That is their right. Now, again, you could then argue moral issues, right? Like the whole Logan Paul situation where this crazy, suicide video is up online and they do nothing about it initially. And then they're like, okay, well, we're going to talk to him. And then he just kind of takes it down himself rather than them actually taking it down, because heaven forbid they besmirch one of their biggest YouTubers, content creators, pulling in a bunch of kids to check out his stupid ass content.
Well, especially when people are talking about it, right? Like, why would you take that down? Like, let's wait for people to come see it first, and while the controversy is happening, and then we'll think about taking it down.
Yeah, so I think for YouTube, it's a tough situation. They've done some shady stuff to, again, push views, to push people then hopefully going to other videos which are monetized, so that way they do get ad revenue in. Again, that's their goal, right? Because YouTube for the longest time made no profit. Up until about like 4 or 5 years ago, they made no profit. I'm not sure even if they still have. I've heard some people say yes, some people say no. But for the longest time, they were making no money because it's so expensive to run the servers and to house all that content that people are constantly putting up, and anyone can put it up, as we said. So that's a lot of videos, that's a lot of audio, that's a lot of just different files overall being stored on these servers. So it's costly. So yeah, I can understand the push for monetization, the push for other factors. Now, how they go about it is another thing, don't get me wrong. But I think they're in a tough situation because, again, they, to a point, want things to work out for everyone, and they want this content out here because, again, that's what drives people to their site. And technically speaking, people can post what they want, and it's up to them to filter it out. But who are we to say that this piece of information is not valid, right? Unless it's blatantly obvious that this is a complete conspiracy hoax video and they're just looking for views, or this person is legitimately just, 3 sheets to the wind, or whatever it may be. Unless you have actual evidence, you can't really say for sure that something isn't really true, right? Especially if they provide some evidence of it. Now, it can be considered conspiratorial, but that doesn't mean it's actually wrong. And that's another thing too, is that then this impacts independent journalists, because there are a ton of independent journalists who are actually covering things that otherwise aren't getting covered by mainstream media. Some of the stuff we talk about would not be covered by mainstream media. Some of the things that other groups, like, say, for instance, Secular Talk with Kyle Kulinski on YouTube, those things would never go through. Content like Jimmy Dore that he covers, that content would never go through. And so, some of them could be considered conspiratorial, but that's because it's based on actual facts. And unfortunately, because of the number of hours that YouTube, or the number of hours that gets uploaded to YouTube, it's really impossible for one single person or even a group of people to really, go through every little thing. So they have to rely on algorithms. So, it's difficult. It's like, okay, well then do they control people's speech and say, well, this isn't worthy, which they're already kind of doing through their monetization, because they're already saying, well, this isn't worthy of monetization. And people are going, what do you mean it isn't? All we're talking about is that we have occupied 7 different countries currently, and we're constantly bombing the hell out of all of them. How is that, how is it not worthy of being monetized so I can support myself as a journalist and let folks know about that? So again, I think it's a tougher situation than this article just leads on. Because, yeah, it's like you're infringing on people, or people are feeling that they're being infringed on. They're like, well, wait a minute, who are you to say that you should be the filter for the type of information that comes to me? But at the same time, we also can't fully trust ourselves in filtering that information and doing the research. And so we just hope that the people presenting the information are correct in what they're saying. And yeah, I don't know. I guess it's tough. I think there are certain videos where they're spreading information that's obviously bullshit and should be taken down, right? And if there are facts against it, absolutely. But again, if you can't have the people to review all of that, it's going to be an issue, because an algorithm's not going to know any better. For the most part, it can go off keywords, but it's really not going to know any better. And it doesn't want to also accidentally kick out the videos that might actually go against those videos. So maybe it's a video highlighting how, for instance, these shootings are not staged events, because many of these theories are based on the fact that people are saying, oh, well, you have these crisis actors and these are all staged events. And so, well, wonder if you have a video that says, well, no, this is proof that these aren't staged events, but because they're talking about that topic with those specific keywords, now they get banned. And so, I mean, really in the end, when you look at it, you just go, well, YouTube just created a beast. They created a beast that they didn't properly implement specific systems into. They weren't they weren't prepared really for this type of growth and for this situation. And you could probably say, well, that's no excuse, especially as Google bought them out and Google runs them. But, I don't know. I just feel like they screwed up and now they're drastically reaching for straws. They're trying to please so many different people, but so many people are getting screwed at the same time.
And I think the creation of the beast also happened because of all these technological advancements, right? Like, it's just so much easier now to grab a camera, put it on yourself, do some stuff. You don't actually have to be on camera. What am I saying? You could even do a slideshow, as it were. Put it to some music, and boom, you've got yourself a video. Mm-hmm. So everything is just also easier. So I think even they could have potentially not foreseen it even back in the days when they first started, because they maybe thought, oh, people, not that many people know how to make a video, upload it, and go to town. So the way they built their platform was one way. And then with the proliferation of a lot of videos, then the other problem became, oh man, we should really, this is really good content from this person, but they're never going to get found in a sea of videos. So let's recommend them to other people who watch similar videos, right? And so it's like these little things along the way that have now turned it into this beast.
Oh yeah, and we actually have some great comments in chat too. For example, just kind of scrolling through, Anna Kronos says YouTube is not a free platform. It's never been free. They have rules from the very beginning. Free platforms don't have rules. This is my opinion for free platform. And also you could think of it too as they're collecting your data. They're still selling that off to advertisers. And so, they're taking up your time. And the more time you spend on it, the more money they make, ideally. So it's not free for you at all. Even though it's not coming off of one of our charge cards or something like that. Vargala's Vet says, that's why I follow my fave quote from Abe Lincoln. Don't believe everything on the internet.
That's also my favorite quote from him. He was so smart. Wasn't he? That hat of his.
Oh, yeah. And then Anna Kronos also says, if we can't trust YouTube, can we trust the official TV media? Well, no, right? And as Mongo says, both are very much a business. Now, it doesn't mean the content creators are a business, though some can be in business for themselves, right? The more clicks they get, the more follows they get, the more subscriptions, the more people engage with them. Again, that means they can monetize, and now they're making bank. And I know a lot of people who went from a piddly little YouTube channel to absolutely massive because of this past 2016 election, people just covering it. Now, some people were great because they just became independent journalists because they want the truth to be put out there, and they grew because of that. Other people, not so much. They did the conspiracy stuff. They went with what seemed to inflame people the most or enrage them the most and decided to highlight that constantly. And you could tell over time that was becoming so repetitive in their videos that it was clickbait. And they just wanted people to view and to comment on both sides, on all party levels too. I'm not just saying one or the other. It was on all party levels this was happening. I will say though, going off of that, I think this article does a little bit of disservice in the sense of it just focuses in and mentions and keeps mentioning, well, the 2016 election. Now, mind you, there was a lot of drama with the 2016 election, from votes not being counted to votes flipping to a lot of different issues, voting machine issues, you name it. People saying that, illegals were coming in to vote and legal immigrants and all this other stuff. There was drama from all camps about the voting situation. And personally, from my perspective of really being entrenched in the 2016 election and beyond, is the fact that this isn't just a 2016 issue, folks. And the reason why I feel like NBC and this writer specifically, because this is where a lot of this information is coming from, is pushing this perspective of the 2016 election is because their ideal candidate did not win. And I'm not saying that, again, one candidate over the other. I'm not saying who to vote for. I'm not saying any of that. But there has been a natural tilt. You know some of the media is tilted to one party or the other. That is just clear. And I feel like they're pushing the 2016 election, but it's a disservice to everyone else. Because if you go, oh, well, the 2016 election, this is going to get me fired up. But as soon as one person comes up and goes, oh, we got it solved, we have it handled, everyone goes, okay, cool. And a lot of people tend to just sit back and go, well, they have this handled. But if you say no, this has been a long-running situation. This has been a long-running problem since even before 2016, 2015, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. People start looking into it more and go, wait a minute. You, one person, one company or whatever, is coming in saying, oh, we have this fixed. You haven't had it fixed for the past 6, 7, 8, 10 years. Now all of a sudden you're saying you have this issue fixed and that we know how to resolve it?
Yeah, AI came in and fixed it for us.
Yeah. And I just think that this is also a disservice just to focusing on 2016 as if it never fucking happened in the first place. As if this has never happened ever on the planet Earth in our political system, especially within the US. I think that's a disservice. Don't just focus in on that. I think it's the most recent, so I think it could be a valid example. But if you're really going to go into YouTube and content in general and into troll farms creating this content or whatever else, then make sure that you have more sufficient experience. Like, go back further and really show people the full image and say, hey, look, this is a bigger picture. This is a lot more serious. We need you, the people, to really get in on this and take a stand and actually do something, rather than just saying, oh, well, this was like a year ago. And so, yeah, it should get you pissed off because of the political thing, but not everything else that has been an issue with content and media for the past 10 years. I don't know. I just think that's a problem. And I think it's a problem, too, because we don't only see this issue on YouTube. We see this issue in the news, in newspapers, online articles, blogs, on MSNBC, on CNN, on Fox News, on all these different platforms. There's so many of these issues being pushed in all of these platforms. So it's not just YouTube. And I think that's the other thing. YouTube does shitty stuff, especially to smaller content creators as of recently. I think that's ridiculous. But I will take a little bit of a stand for YouTube too, in the sense of it's not just YouTube, but they just happen to be the prime scapegoat to push, again, a certain spin. And again, I'm not saying there aren't fake people out there, but I'm saying it's a lot more of a gray area. It's not just clear black and white. There are people really trying to do a benefit and help people, and there are people who are just, completely crazy or who are trying to make money off of it. Mm-hmm. And we have to look at the whole picture, again, which is the whole point of this show, is look at the whole picture. Look at all the different pathways shooting out from a specific topic and discuss them and know that they exist. And know that these are all options. And it's up to us to do the research to figure out what is the best path to take. And that it's not always as simple as one discussion and then we go, okay, we're good.
But it's so much easier. It's so much easier to put your head in the sand, isn't it? I got stuff to do today. I don't have time for this. It's only my entire life, my entire future. It's cool though. Right now, I just have to get my iPad and give it to my child.
Well, Anachronos mentions too, all politics speak right now. The thing is that they talk about all this before elected, and after they turn a complete 180. To kind of go off of the topic of the shooting, for instance, people say, oh, gun control, and they'll talk about it to get elected. But as soon as something happens once they're elected, you say, well, look, so what are you going to do about this? Now is not the time. Our thoughts and prayers are to those that lost their lives. This is not the appropriate time to talk about this. Okay, so when is it? When you're getting elected again, but you can't do anything about it because you're not elected in office yet? Again, these are things that we all have to look at and go, wait a minute, there's so much inconsistencies here between what's being said, all these platitudes, and what's being implemented. And it's not just from politicians, it's also from different news outlets. It's also from different businesses and organizations. Everyone has a stake at what happens to our government, and so people try to speak louder than others. And it's based on them on how they do so, whether it's with money, influence, you name it. And also, welcome Touch Me Nancy, aka Drew, Evan and Tatiana for co-presidents 2020. There we go. All right.
No, we gotta get some some marketing materials out now, because it's already 2018. We're going to blink. It's going to be 2019.
All right. So, Drew, you start making the bumper stickers. And then Mongo, if you want to be our PR team, that would be great. We'll take you on there.
I will say that I personally have no interest in being in politics, because the people who are in politics and who do a freaking phenomenal job being politicians, all the power to them. It is not something I am skilled at. Although a lot of the times I feel like mostly what you need is common sense. But anyways, yeah, I definitely, support the people that is their passion. They do know what they're doing, and they are standing up for the things that I believe in. They mirror my beliefs, as it will. But I'll support you. I'll go for it. If this is where you're announcing your candidacy.
Well, I think I'm the same way. I want to inform. I want to educate. I'm more of an educator than anything else. As much as I would love to implement things, it takes more than just one person. It takes a group of people. And it takes a group of people at different levels. We can't just say, too, well, get the politicians in there then that will make change, because you got to be there to support them then, too. They got to feel like they're getting support, and they have to understand what you want. So you have to voice your opinion. So we need people to create channels where they can voice their opinion. We need people to be brave enough to voice their opinion in the first place. We need people to help push those people that we feel should be candidates and should be in office. We need to help levitate them or raise them up to that level then. And as Anachronos said, I mean, even his small country, politics are the same like ours. Difference is they have less power. So we do have more power than many countries. I almost said companies. Well, it's getting there. It's kind of there. So, yeah, so, it's like we have at least the power, and other countries do see this, that the people of the United States, you do have power. You do need to do something, because there are much smaller countries who are trying to do something, who don't have as much power and still stand up for what they believe in and not bury their head in the sand. And I think that is some of the negative views of why we get some of the negative views we do here for United States citizens, is the fact that other countries go, look, you have more opportunities than I do, and I'm out in the streets protesting. Get out there. If you see issues, get out there. Support the people who want to do something and who want to take action, and you yourself go and take action. And so I think, again, there's some people on YouTube who are trying to do that. And so you can't say they're all conspiracy theorists, and you can't all just blanket it all and say, well, they should be banned because they're not part of a big corporation telling me information. So it's difficult. I think they do have a right, though, or I think they do have a moral responsibility that if something, again, has been proven false, it's getting enough downvotes and enough hate in the comments to go, look, this information's all wrong. Here are different resources showing that it's wrong. They should take it down. They shouldn't monetize it. They should not promote it.
Except, as we've learned, part of their algorithm, it does count things like downvotes just as engagement.
Right. So they don't look at it as downvotes. Yeah.
Right. Well, as far as YouTube is concerned, whether 100,000 people like it and nobody hates it, or 50,000 people love it and 50,000 people hate it, to them it just says, ooh, we got 100,000 views on that. Let's bump it up to more.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I remember hearing, but I've never actually seen it implemented, where if the ratio of dislikes is higher than likes, like that ratio is huge, they will actually take the video down, or at least look into it to see if it is harmful.
Oh, really?
But if that actually happens, I've not seen it. And for the most part, again, yeah, they do consider a downvote just as engagement. So if you hate a video and you think, oh man, this is terrible, don't watch it. Don't thumb it one way or the other, and don't comment on it, because that's the other problem. Yep. You get a lot of these, if you disagree with a video, if you think, you know what, this is false information and this shouldn't be on here, don't comment on that video. Contact YouTube directly or contact the person directly. Do not comment on it, because all you're doing is feeding that algorithm, and you're telling the algorithm, okay, this is popular, because they look at upvotes, downvotes, they look at comments, they look at everything, the amount of time you spent on that video. So if you keep going back to it, if you keep sharing it with friends and go, look at this idiot and what they're saying, the YouTube algorithm doesn't go, oh yeah, they sent this because they thought this person was an idiot. No, they go, well, they probably shared it because they liked it. So we as consumers too have to be careful and understand these algorithms, understand that no matter the type of engagement to those algorithms, to that AI, it is engagement. And so more of these videos will get pushed up to the top because of it. Because again, the algorithm doesn't naturally just push stuff up to the top overall, at least supposedly. Supposedly. Again, I do feel like if something is a hot topic, it'll just get boosted up anyway with the right meta tags. But I think overall, it is also our search. It is also who's watching it, how long they're watching it for, and the overall engagement. And so we have to be careful of doing that and not doing stupid shit like sharing. I won't list certain people or specific people or groups, but certain videos that just are reprehensibly wrong and inaccurate and just overall, a scam in many ways to get attention, to get likes and stuff. So we also have to be careful with that. And also, welcome Bowie Oh Bowie. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. We really do appreciate it. And our countries work in a similar manner, though. So there's a lot of talk between the differences between Canada and the U.S. as well. We
have somebody here from Bulgaria. I was going to say, that is actually another reason why I can't run for president. I wasn't born here.
That's true.
Rip.
Romanian.
Also, I'm a woman, and I don't think they let women run for... Just kidding. They let them run. They just don't like to advertise it much.
Well, and it depends on the candidate. It depends on many things, too. I think there's always been a gender bias, but I think there's also a lot more on top of that, too. That just does not help, unfortunately.
Right.
So, but thank you all. Welcome to chat. Again, we are just wrapping up, talking about how these YouTube videos, they keep getting pushed up to the top. And is YouTube to blame for it? These kind of conspiratorial videos, especially with the recent shootings in Florida, where a lot of people are saying, oh, well, they're crisis actors. What we're seeing was all staged, which always crops up no matter the shooting, no matter the terrible incident that does happen. It always crops up. Is this a crisis situation, or are these just crisis actors? And we're kind of going on the debate against that. And I think for the most part, we've covered both sides of it. It's a lot trickier of a situation than what many people are just purporting or reporting.
And we'll have our conspiracy theory video up on YouTube at our YouTube channel shortly.
So make sure to share it on Twitter. Get as many likes as possible, or dislikes. That's fine.
Yeah,
use hashtag MMTV controversy for more.
So we've talked a little bit about how YouTube is and their content creators are terrifying people. But how are horror writers terrifying their readers, right? What's the methodology? Entertainment Weekly sat down with two acclaimed horror authors, to talk about how they go about creating horror on the page. So they spoke with Alma Katsu, who actually just has a new book out called The Hunger. And it is, of course, an edge-of-your-seat horror novel. And they also talked with Jennifer McMahon. There you go. Who's the author of Burntown. Just to discuss more broadly the genre of horror, and also the book The Hunger. Now, for those of you that don't know, The Hunger takes on the historical tragedy of the Donner Party. And if you don't know who the Donner Party is, let me tell you. The Donner Party was a group of American pioneers led by George Donner and James Reed, who set out for California in a wagon train in May 1846. They were, had some mishaps and mistakes along the way, and they actually had to spend the winter of 46 to 47 snowbound in the Sierra Nevada. So some of the pioneers resorted to cannibalism. And you can certainly, look up on Wikipedia the kind of the historical account of the Donner Party. But basically, 87 people set out. Only 48 managed to get to California. And according to their accounts, they resorted to eating their dead to survive. So it's one of the most bizarre tragedies in this California history of the Western U.S. migration. And I thought it was interesting because as recent migrants to the California, road tripping across the U.S. from the East Coast, it's a long way.
What was it? It took us like 8 days driving 6 hours a day or so.
Yeah, and like we took it slower, but obviously we have the technological advancement of a car.
Oh yeah, exactly. We could drive 60, 70, 80 miles an hour. You're not getting a horse and buggy or oxen with a cart to go that fast. It ain't happening, folks.
Yeah, and we have paved roads that allowed us to do that as well, and really nice, shelter accoutrements known as hotels to shelter us.
And we didn't have to worry about dysentery. Thank you, Oregon Trail, for that one.
Right, or ferrying our wagon across anywhere. So
ford across the river. Oh, everyone drowned. Shit.
So the hunger again talks about all of the different misfortunes of the Donner Party, and this is what Katsu says, who's the author specifically, when she was asked why choose the Donner Party as the setting, or the protagonists, I guess if you could call them protagonists, of a horror novel. And she says, I think that while a lot of people have heard of the Donner Party, they don't know the details. We're told about it in elementary school, and if we remember anything, it's that something terrible happened a long time ago, and it involved cannibalism, right? And that's a word that just can already send us to like, cannibalistic, oh my god. It's already horrifying, right? And she says, but once you start digging into it, you see the real dimensions of the horror. After months of struggle in the wilderness, close to 100 people find themselves trapped in the mountains with no food and no chance of escape. Now, these are all families, so it's mothers, fathers, forced to watch their children die of starvation. It's completely horrific. You can absolutely understand why someone would contemplate cannibalism. And the more I learned about it, the more it seemed that the party was actually doomed from the start. So many macabre things happened. They left sick people behind to die. One man, for example, he was convinced that he was going to be robbed, so he went out to bury his gold and was never seen alive again. So you get the feeling that they were cursed. So to be cursed implies that you did something to deserve it, and that's where the idea for the book came from. That we all have the potential in us for evil, and if you feed the evil side, you'll unleash the monster. And I want to say that one more time because that really speaks to how horror writers can terrify their readers, right? You write about a story about the fact that we all have the potential in us for evil, and if you feed the evil side, you'll unleash the monster. And that's horrifying to think about it, right? McMahon, when they started talking about the overall genre of horror, she said, I think maybe people have misconceptions about what horror is and can be, right? It doesn't have to be in-your-face violent, and it doesn't have to be about a serial killer or zombies or vampires, although, I love all those things. Those books are great. But it can be character-driven. It can be, quote, literary, unquote. And it can seamlessly blend with other classic types of stories, right? Coming of age, historical. Obviously, this is a historical book, historical fiction, horror book, mystery, and so on. And she says that, I'm not big on explicit gore and much prefer a slow, atmospheric buildup of horror. I think that what you don't show is almost more important than what you do show. And again, something that I want to emphasize about how to write horror, if that's something that you're interested in, is what people most end up enjoying, whether it is a book or a movie or a TV show, isn't the splatter and the visceral elements, but the human part. The struggle to survive, to overcome our fear, saved our loved one, to overcome a crippling anxiety that's holding us back. And the horror element is just a way for the writer to up the ante, right? To make the situation larger than life, because that makes for a more enjoyable story. And strangely, actually inoculates the reader from real fear, right? Because that's so absurd, it's so horrific that it's not truly real in a way. We want to be scared, she says, but we want to be in control too. So if you're into horror, for sure, this book sounds like a great read. If you're into historical fiction, this is also a pretty good read. And in her research, Katsu actually learned that television writers, for all genres, but of course also historical fiction specifically, they're under pressure to make things easy for production, right? So they take a little bit of a shortcut with history. And much of like what she learned from television, from seeing this historical television, actually turned out to be incorrect. Like, for example, did you know that pioneers didn't actually travel inside their wagons when they did the West migration, but they actually walked alongside them to spare the oxen the burden of like having to carry them too. Plus, inside their wagons, they had all their shit. They had all their stuff, so they actually slept outside their wagons as well at night in tents because their wagons were filled with crap. And again, having made the road trip, I can attest to the fact that the car was filled with crap that we were bringing over. So The Hunger and these wonderful books, this historical fiction books, have these nice little facts that actually make the fiction feel real as well. So my question to everybody is, what are your thoughts on horror? Me personally, I feel like I think of the word horror and I'm like, oh no, I don't want to get in on that, right? But reading through this article, it made me really fascinated because, I don't like gore and in-your-face type of thing, regardless of the fact that we're playing Doom on Fridays. But I do like that sort of slow buildup of that psychological thriller, one might say that it is more like, where it does make me, I guess, have to confront my inner evil, right? Or just look to see, wow, this is like somebody came up with this. This is like fucked up, and that's scary in and of itself, that we do have this sort of potential for evil inside of us, right? And if you as a writer actually sit down at your table and try to think of that, or Katsu was actually an analyst for some humanitarian organizations in the past, and she had to look at some like the most atrocious things that people actually did in history. Looking at what we're capable of, and then also imagining what we could be capable of, that is horrifying.
Oh yeah.
But what do you think? What are your thoughts on horror? I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been a huge horror fan. I've been more of a thriller. Suspense has been okay. I like mysteries. I like action, but yeah, even in action though too, for instance, or other genres, you can see elements of the push for gore, the push for blood, the push for someone's eyeball getting popped out, and it drives me nuts because, again, what you're going for is shock value. At that point, it's not horror. It's a gross factor. It's a shock value factor. So you're doing a shock film. It's not a horror film at that point. Ideally, to me, horror is this sense of just a knowing fear. That fear is based on elements that we cannot control, including not just a knife-wielding lunatic, but also the environment. Packs of dogs as you're out in the wild, for instance, that can become a horror film because you're being hunted by a pack of wolves. You don't know whether you're going to live or die. You don't know when that's going to happen. And so you have this sense of suspense that keeps building and building. But there's this also just innate fear of survivability. And I think that at the core, that's what horror should be, in a way, is to really push our boundaries in the sense of our own survivability, our own lives, that balance of life and death. Basically hit on the things that we fear. And unfortunately, we get these kind of almost like shock jock radio announcers, but now it's, with film, it's shock film.
Shock jock is a...
Oh yeah, like Howard Stern is known as a shock jock.
Wow, I've never heard that phrase before, but I see it now. Yes, yeah. That is true.
And most people look down on that, but they'll still go see a movie where it's all about just like torturing people for funsies. And again, it's like at this point, you pretty much know they're going to die. And there's still some horror elements in that. Like, oh my God, someone actually escaped and will they make it out? Like, there's a bit of that. And they know that. And that's why they still implement parts of it. But so much of it, of the highlight is on the actual gore and blood and what's happening to the person at the time. But at that point, we've already disengaged, right? Because we already realized this person's screwed. This person is dead or not really going to make it. And so we can't just say that's horror. And so for me, it's about the elements. It's about the environment. Because again, the environment can just be as much of a villain as anything else, or ourselves. I mean, you look at the standard kind of breakdown of what makes a good story, and we look at all the different tropes of like man versus self, man versus man versus environment. Those still hold true, and those can be a great implementation of horror. It's not just about the action, but what caused the action, and then the domino effect after that action happens. That's really what continues a stream of horror. And we just don't see it in a lot of these films or stories or books. A lot of it is just broken up into, well, this person got maimed, this person got split open. It's just a unique way of how does someone die or get harmed, and that doesn't become horror at that point.
There's a lot of ways to kill a person.
Oh yeah, and I think too that, like, for instance, the original Final Destination, I don't remember a lot of it, but I remember like people really grabbed onto it or gravitated toward it because death was the killer, but it was through events. It was through actions that happened in the environment. So at any point in time, someone could just get hit by a car, just like in real life. But they emphasized it in a way that it had even bigger stress and even bigger emotional attachment was put onto it. And so it became horror. Now, of course, you can then look at all the Final Destinations after that and go, okay, then it started kind of becoming the shock value. How do people die? We know they're going to die. And then they literally would grab the person's face, basically, and shove it to where they wanted to see it and go, look, see, this is how they're going to die because this screw is loosening. See, it's wiggling. Yeah, you know something's going to happen, right? Instead of just letting it happen and us going, whoa, what the hell just happened? And, let us experience shock that way, than grabbing our hair, basically, and dragging us around going, see, this is what I want you to see. This is what's going to happen next.
Well, and that's something I think, too, that I think television struggles with, or films, the visual versus, let's say, like a book. Because at least with a book, you can sort of, you have to use your imagination, right? Even if the book kind of spells it out for you a little bit, you still have to sort of imagine it. And so it takes you to that place, whereas with something like a visual medium like TV or film, if you don't really show it, it's just harder to imagine because you've been shown everything else. Mm-hmm. So then they have to, once they do show you something, to get that sort of same reaction from you, right? They have to up the ante. It has to be even more gore and more screws and more in your face. Otherwise, you yourself don't get that same thrill from it again, that same high, as it were.
And some people in chat are already getting in on the discussion. Let's see. Touch Me Nancy says, going to sound like a bullshit lie, but I don't really get scared because I have the knowledge that it's not real. So horror books and movies don't really do much for me, but they are very creative. He says, but now if it was happening to me personally, I'd be needing some Depends.
And RX Mongo, Tatiana thoughts pretty much summed up mine. Fantastic. I love it. Too much to build up to the point ruins the peak and the premise. Right, yeah, you gotta draw that fine line between not showing enough skin and showing too much skin, right? Is it? It's kind of where it's at.
Well, and I think again, it's just about the what if. Feed off of our psychological fears. We always have what ifs, and we're always like, well, what if this happens? What if this happens?
Oh,
what
yeah,
if we fail? What if this goes as this? And da-da-da-da. So feed off of those. Don't just, put actual human physical torture, because a lot of times mental torture is a horror within itself as well. For example, you could look at video games too. I would say a great example of horror in a way would actually be Senua's Sacrifice, Hellblade. Mm-hmm. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice.
Yes, that is an amazing video game.
Like, there is a little bit of gore to it, and there is some action to it, But overall, the horror is the environment, because you're walking through as this girl from like a Viking tribe or some kind of like ancestral tribe of some sort. And she's been sent out to basically like get rid of like a demon or evil or something like that, because she's been cast out anyway. She has some sort of like black mark on her.
She's trying to save her love from the underworld or something.
From the underworld, like okay. And so I feel like, because I've only seen bits of it, I don't know the full story, but it seems to me that from what they've created, it's all about environment. The different voices that you hear throughout, some of them being in her head. The different lighting changes and how some things are in focus and some things aren't. Just that kind of, that feeling of being stripped of your abilities. Your cognitive ability, your sense of balance, your sense of light, your sense of what you see overall. All of that can be constructed in a way that creates horror.
Yeah, and then I think the most really horrifying aspect of that is that exactly some of that is in her head. So it's the interaction of what's happening inside of her with her environment, and that is the terrifying part, because if you think about essentially losing your mind, losing yourself, not really being sure what's real, that's fucking scary. That's scary. And then she's also a warrior, so now she has to go and sort of live like that out in the world. And there's some things that happened to her because of her, etc. And so there's a lot to unpack there as well. But it's an incredible visual and auditory experience. And like Evan said, it's like it's the environment, but a lot of that environment isn't real for her. Well, it is real for her, but it's not really out there. So that's scary.
And I think a lot of horror films, not so much horror writers, again, it really is kind of dependent, but I think horror films could learn a lot from video games, actually. Usually it's been the other way around, where we say, oh, this video game could have learned a lot from a film on how they did certain shots and the dialogue and everything else. But I think a lot of horror films could learn a lot from these video games now and how to kind of control a mood. Touch Me Nancy says, now here's the difference for me, because I'm controlling the sort of like the physicality of the character. Games scare the shit out of me. Well, that's just what works for me. And again, yeah, you can look at some of the Resident Evil games. You can look at many other horror thriller games. Just look at the categories on Steam. Look under that. You're gonna find it. There's also different versions of what we consider horror, as we've mentioned. But like, say for instance, now talking about games, there is a game out there that's called Doki Doki Literature Club.
Oh God.
And that just seems like a harmless, innocent kind of Japanese game where you're playing through stuff and everything's brightly colored and it just seems kind of silly. You're like, what the hell is this? And then it twists on you and screws with you so badly mentally that people have actually cried from playing the game and so kind of finishing it, even if you will. I don't want to spoil anything. But I mean, how would you describe Doki Doki? You've seen more than I have. I've just mostly made fun of the bits I have seen, but
actually, I think it's a lot like a horror novel. So it's essentially it's like one of those dating sim game things that apparently has sprouted around like mushrooms. But like a novel, it really gets you emotionally invested. You know, they set up the premise. You're talking with all of these people. You're getting really invested. You're making choices along the way. You really it draws out the process like a book would, where you're reading about it and you're getting invested in who these characters are. So by the time that they make the choices or the stuff that happens to them, it ends up being horrifying. It's even more like it's even more horrifying because you now feel this connection to them. And then with Doki Doki, it was the same way. You know, you spent a few hours, you know, getting to know these people and trying to figure out probably what the point is of this whole thing, if you're not into those games to begin with. And then by the time the other stuff sort of starts happening, it's hard to just remove yourself from it and say, oh, okay, this is just the game. You're just like, wait, what the fuck happened? Did I do something wrong? And again, it feeds off of those fears that we have inside of us. And obviously not everyone who plays Doki Doki will get that invested in it, because potentially maybe they don't take it as seriously or whatever it might be. But for the most part, I think pretty much everyone's reactions that I've seen by the time they get to sort of later into the game pretty much kind of react the same way. Obviously some people, when they are shown something horrifying or experiencing it, some laugh, some cry, some go into denial, like, this is not happening, what the fuck. But yes, you really want us to stream it, don't you?
No,
not
at all. But I will say too, though, with a game, at least you can break the fourth wall, right? At least a lot easier than you can with, say, a film or a book. And with Doki Doki, and I don't want to spoil anything, but there is a point where they do end up breaking the fourth wall and start screwing with your reality, literally, based on how you engage with the game. And I think out of everything else, that was a very brilliant choice and really does show horror, because you're like, now, wait a minute. What is actually going on here? Is there something wrong with my game? Is there something wrong with me? You start questioning yourself. You start questioning, did I get hacked? Like, what the hell is going on here? And so you start questioning everything and start getting paranoid. And that's what they wanted. They wanted to build up, for instance, this kind of, I guess, ignorant self-safety or safety of self or environment. And they completely just kind of rip it out from underneath you and go, surprise! And you're like, what?
It's a very meta kind of game. You know, it knows, the developer made the game in mind with the fact that he knew that you were going to play a game, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And it's all about intent. I think that's the other thing with horror, too, is what is your intent? Or with any creative endeavor, you should really be asking, what is my intent? What do I want to have people leave feeling? And if you just think, well, this is a great story idea, this is going to be so cool, you start selling yourself on the story as a creator, that becomes an issue. You never want to do that. You want to go, well, who's going to be watching? How will they feel about this? What is the impact I want them to leave with after viewing this or experiencing this? And never just like, well, I think it's a cool story, it's going to work. Because a lot of times it then does not. So having that intent behind things is really important. And because you understand the intent, you can then push the boundaries so much further, so much more easily, and really make something impactful that gets people's attention, that engages and entertains in a way, and that can get people thinking. And that's what you want with the horror genre anyway, as well as suspense, as well and thriller and mystery, is get people thinking. If you're not getting their brains activated, it's not going to happen. They're not going to get engagement the way you want and get so emotionally invested that as soon as something happens, they get so scared they throw their book up in the damn air. You know what I mean? Like, if that doesn't happen, you're not doing it right. My thoughts, at least. My thoughts. So, and we've also mentioned, too, evidently, Touch Me Nancy says, Amnesia is a prime example of a game that freaks me out. He says, also Outlast 2 was pretty good as well for RX Mongo. So, yeah, again, there's plenty of games out there. Even multiplayer games are starting to go more into the horror genre. When we look at, for instance, Dead by Daylight and Friday the 13th, the game. Again, now we do have knife-wielding enemies, but the thing is that they've created an environment around these villains that make it scary as hell, and you tend to scare yourself more than the actual being does. And that's the whole point. That's another whole point, is the fears that you create in your head and project out, and how people look at reality in different ways. They can look at the same thing and see two different things, though. So I could look at some and go, that's, this is safe. Another person says, no, that is not safe.
Right. It's like when we were playing Doom the other day and you were walking down the hallway and I heard the music and I was just like, oh my God, something's going to come on. And then the music would spike and I'm like, oh, what is that? And it's like nothing. There's nothing there. It's just music. But it was scary.
Yeah, it's
watch those clips, guys.
It's an ebb and flow that you have to keep. I think Doom is a great example, though. They do have those moments. The remake of Doom, I should say, from 2016. Yeah, 2016 from Bethesda and id Software. And they do a great job of really, having the action and everything else, but also balancing those moments of, oh shit. and creating certain environments. Some of the Alien games have been great for that too. Alien, you look at Alien itself as well. Yes, there were these aliens that wanted to kill you, but a lot of times it was the situations that people put in because they're in confined spaces in space where no one can hear you scream.
But they can hear you getting beat up. TV, man. Amnesia. You're trapped in a mansion with no weapons and a lantern. Oh my god, already sounds terrifying to me. The monsters don't like the light. Oh good. But you can run out of oil. Oh bad. And even your character's sanity meter is a factor. Your character can start to see stuff. Wow, that is a creepy AF. I will not be playing it, but I might watch somebody stream it. Yes, and manga, music is another thing. Crazy how certain sounds can cause suspense. Exactly. And how the ukulele can cause the opposite emotion. Just laughter.
Or as Touch Me Nancy says, the lack of, too. You know, if you're used to loud noises and suddenly it goes dead quiet.
Oh my god.
That can be horrifying as well.
I literally just got chills.
See, all you have to do is talk about it, and certain people are just so emotionally invested into it because they've had experiences or they've had such strong emotional responses to situations like that. And so it's up to the creator to understand that and know that and be able to implement it and not just go, oh, well, everyone's scared of a person with a weapon. No, because that person could also get a weapon and beat the crap out of the other person. So at that part, we're just like,
But darkness, not seeing stuff? Ooh.
Forgetting who you are and where you are and the things around you, not knowing if they're friendly or not knowing. Again, it's really about survivability, I think, in the end. I mean, that's all it is like many of these things that we're describing are just survival games. Whether it's Escape from Tarkov or Conan Exiles, it's just all survival. Like, will I have enough water? Will I have enough food? Will I have shelter? Can I find shelter? Is something going to pop out at me and rip my arm off and beat me with it? Again, going back to the Doom references, if you played that game, you know what I'm talking about.
We play it on Friday. Come check us out, guys.
Yeah. Twitch.tv/MindMineTV. Brought to you by... No. But again, it's things like that. And, you know, you have to know the platform you're on. What is available? What are the tools available for you? And how can you implement them? And I think that's clearly huge. But I would say, though, you know, speaking of writing, speaking of people implementing certain tools and being able to utilize said tools correctly, a thing you may not realize is that robots are out there and they are writing news stories.
What? Sounds like a conspiracy off of YouTube.
Wow.
Yeah,
believe it or not, robots are right now starting to be implemented, or AI is starting to be implemented to do journalism, to write news stories for people. Basically, back in November, as an example, when Republican Steve King beat Democratic challenger Kim Weaver in the race for Iowa's 4th congressional district seat, the Washington Post covered the event, and the article read, "Republicans retained control of the House and lost only a handful of seats from their commanding majority, a stunning reversal of fortune after many GOP leaders feared double-digit losses." Now, nothing outrageous as Post articles go, except for the one key difference. It was generated by Heliograph, a bot. Yes, a bot. Made its debut on the newspaper's website last year and marked the most sophisticated use of artificial intelligence in journalism to date. So now Jeff Bezos, of course, bought the Washington Post, which maybe not many people realize, back in 2013. So not only does he own Amazon, and Amazon owns Twitch and all these other things, blah, 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 he also owns the Washington Post. And back then, about 5 years ago now, AI-powered journalism was in its infancy, with only a handful of companies with automated content generating systems. So even back in 2013, there were still systems. And then Jeff Bezos for the Washington Post decided to try to amplify that even more because he saw something in it. So Jeremy Gilbert, who joined the Post as their director of strategic initiatives in 2014, said they wanted a system that could foster a seamless interaction between human and machine. Okay, well, that doesn't really give us a whole hell of a lot to work with, but so then how does it work? Well, from what they've said is editors create narrative templates for the stories, including key phrases that account for a variety of potential outcomes. So, for instance, from Republicans retain control of the House to Democrats regain control of the House. And then they hook heliograph up to any source of structured data. In the case of the election, the data clearinghouse, votesmart.org. The heliograph software identifies the relevant data, matches it with the corresponding phrases in the template, merges them, and then publishes different versions across different platforms. So the system can also alert reporters via Slack of any anomalies it finds in the data. For instance, wider margins than predicted, so they can investigate. As Gilbert has said, it's just one more way to get a tip on a potential scoop. So there's a lot to unpackage here. The fact that resources are now being invested into AI to basically write our stories. But you could look at it as, but they're being fed data, information, specific points from actual journalists in the field. And that seems to be the big argument here, is that some people might be concerned about it, but like basically have no fear. We have real journalists collecting this information. Basically, heliograph is just writing it. So it takes the data and goes, okay, insert all the different points, kind of like an extreme version of Mad Libs, piecing it all together and going, okay, great. And then if it comes across issues, which is kind of nice, it will inform the reporters in charge of that information to look deeper to make sure what is actually going on here. Like, where's the variables and how have they changed? Now, the first benefit of the Newsbot, it says, is to grow the newspaper's audience. Instead of targeting a big audience with a small number of labor-intensive human-written stories, Heliograph can target many small audiences with a huge number of automated stories about niche or local topics. So basically what they're saying is, hey guys, look, we know for the past 5 to 10 years, there has been a major decline in reporting, basically, that we've hired less people as a company, as a publisher. We've hired less people because less people are paying money. Less people are buying subscriptions. Less people are getting the newspaper delivered to them. So that's less money to us. So we have to cut back on the number of people who are doing these reports. And therefore, what you've had for the past 5, 6, 10 years has been a small number of reporters trying to handle everything. So you get stuff that ends up coming out late, or people get stretched thin, lots of pressure and stress on the reporters because they're not only gathering information, they have to write everything and piece it all together. Whereas they're hoping that this AI bot will come in to fill in all the gaps, to bring everything together, basically, to kind of adhere it all together and then push it out and be able to cover more stories because of that, because then the reporters can focus in on reporting. They've also said that as newsrooms struggle with dwindling resources, like we've mentioned, again, it's just the reporters who gather information write more discrete chunks. So here's some facts, here's some analysis, and let the system assemble it. So again, the focus more so, what they're trying to say here is that the focus is more so on the actual data, because you have people who can 100% focus in on it and not have to worry about then, well, how will this sound in the article? Heliograph will basically do that. And now they said there is a second objective, though, if you want to take that on, Tatiana.
Essentially, kind of similar to the first, but it's really to make the newsroom more efficient, right? So you're by removing these sort of like grunt tasks from the reporter's task lists, like poll coverage and like real-time results. Heliograph frees them up to actually focus on stories that require human thought, that require human intervention. There's no need for a seasoned journalist, 20, 30 years of experience to be writing a story that a template could write, because it's a waste of that journalist's time and the resources of the newsroom, right? And so by allowing these journalists to actually do the investigative research, to go out into the field, to actually talk to people, look up at things. Obviously, this bot can't, pick up, put on its little raincoat and its little top hat and like go out and talk to people. It just, as Evan mentioned, it just gets fed the information from what you hope is reputable, factual sources, maybe not YouTube. But then those other journalists can go out in the field and then spend time literally researching the news, as it were. And I think, that's exactly the benefit that I see to it, of course, is, can you imagine if you could go somewhere, right, find out a bunch of information, do all this research, gather your thoughts, and then be able to dictate to an automated system what you want to write, and then that system takes care of making sure it's grammatically correct, making sure it makes sense, making sure there's no typos, making sure that it flows as a story, presents it to you. You can read it real quick, be like, great, this looks good, boom, go to press, right? Which, Grammarly, for example, nowadays, apparently seems to be a handy tool for people when they're writing, right? And that's an automated system that's essentially using templates that have been fed into it. This is what a correct sentence is.
This is where you put a comma. This is where you don't.
This is how you spell this word. And so, and it helps you write it. It doesn't necessarily take away your ability to write or to come up with what you want to write. It's just helping you do it faster. And as we mentioned earlier, it's another tool that helps us be more efficient. It can be, right? So I, looking in the good part of this, I agree with Gilbert and the Post people. It makes things more efficient. It can help the business, instead of laying off journalists, they can keep them on, get this bot to help out to grow their audience, so that then maybe in the future they can hire more journalists.
Well, and if Heliograph can cover more articles, then what you're looking at too is more content being pushed out, which means more content that needs to be researched by said journalists.
Exactly. And then how do you determine, where do your resources go? And obviously, if I'm a new journalist, let's say a reporter, I want to get the good stories. I want to go on the hunt for things that will change my career. I don't want to sit there and just constantly write about election results every frickin' election, right?
Right.
Unless you should write about it because something nefarious is happening. But at that point, spend time trying to figure out what's nefarious about what you're writing rather than just the writing of it, as it were. Now, obviously, and bots, right? They're already in use on platforms like Twitch. Hello, Nightbot.
Yeah.
How are you? How are you doing today? And also in our smartphones, right? You've got Siri, you've got Cortana, in our house gadgets like Alexa. So it's not new having these bots who are curating things for us, who are helping us out, if you will. But what's the negative? Or what are some of the potential negatives? It's AI. It's not a human.
Mm-hmm.
Right? One could say, we've talked a lot in the past about AI and robots, and sort of this automated systems taking over a certain type of job. And typically, when people think about that, they typically think of something that's maybe physically intensive, right? Manual labor, maybe, or something that is repetitive and sort of quote unquote mindless, like data entry or automated, just anything that just doesn't really quite require you to be 100% awake or aware or alert. But it turns out that AI, robots, automated systems, they can actually potentially take over certain jobs that are not just physically intensive, right? They can take over writing our news stories. They can take over monitoring Wall Street. They can take over, running our power plants, and making decisions that impact a lot of people and not just something that is physical. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something certainly that it is a worry when I think about that side of that spectrum.
Yeah, well, and Mongo actually points out this goes back to the YouTube algorithms as well. We put too much reliance on it, but they're still screwing up, right? Because people try to push out all this AI and all this technology without really understanding the full potential of it. They just hope that it grows with it being used. And that's the issue, though. We don't know, and a lot of times these algorithms do screw up, and it doesn't know how to fix itself because there are new issues that arise, right? And when it comes across new issues, it can't go back to data to look at it and go, oh, this has happened 10 other times, I know how to handle it. It won't know what to do. And then you have to have a person come in anyway to take care of it. So I think there's an over-reliance, and this is very hackable.
Oh, yeah.
And, if people are already concerned that supposedly the elections in 2016 were hacked by whatever country, whatever group, whatever corporation, you name it, whatever. If you're worried about that, this should not make you feel any more comfortable than if you're seeing polling results being done by AI when it could be also hacked. Now, that doesn't mean that the polling results or certain poll numbers or estimates that are getting pushed out during political runs or political races aren't always on point or don't have a spin. A lot of times they do. A lot of times you'll see newspapers who put someone way ahead, like, oh, they're going to win by a landslide and all this other stuff, and then they end up not, right? So we've seen it go very badly for people in general who have to put out these articles and handle these numbers. So I'm not saying that it couldn't go wrong by a human either, but again, you're worried about hacking. That could very well happen. Most tech people too say, look, artificial intelligence can be great. It can do great things, but there's also not enough being in place to protect people who utilize AI or smart devices, the internet of the internet of things, or the internet of everything. People are saying, hey, there's some serious issues here, some serious holes that need to be patched for this technology to be safe. But because businesses are making money and they see they can make more money, they push it out anyway.
Yeah, and to your point of, getting some of the information that maybe isn't really reliable. Actually, last year, Facebook fired the human editors of its trending module. And they let an algorithm actually curate the news. And unfortunately, that algorithm thought that Megyn Kelly had been fired from Fox News and was spreading that out there. So, because people were talking about it. But that wasn't true. So there is something to be said about, where these bots even get their data from, how accurate that is, and how, when that data is being fed into their systems, how they react. Because as you mentioned, actually, Evan, on the YouTube segment, people who are talking about the same issue but presenting the correct facts or disputing what the original commentators are talking about, potentially all that the bot really sees is just like, well, people are talking about it, so it must be true. Not that, well, people are talking about it, these people are saying no, and these people are saying yes. And then how does the bot make the decision of what's actually true? It's very interesting.
Well, and let's say something happens again. For instance, we don't have the power source for that AI to run. Then what happens, right? Now, you're probably not printing papers anyway or uploading things, but that is something to think about then. Who's going to go in and do the work to report the news? You don't have these AIs writing it out. You're going to have to get people, but now you don't have as many people as you used to have or as you need to do the amount of work that's being expected. Or let's say the AI has an issue and now you have to take it down. Now you're getting hit. If you want to look at it from a business perspective, you're getting hit in your profit margin because you're putting out less information. People are losing interest because they're going, you're not a source of news anymore. Why aren't you reporting about this, and this? You used to. Now all of a sudden you're not. Well, we can't use the AI anymore because there are issues, or there was hacking involved, or whatever else. That can negatively impact you in a really bad way. So again, I mean, you can look at it from a business perspective where it could be really a bad PR situation and customer relations situation. You can look at it from a tech perspective of that. Yes, it makes it more effective, more efficient, and it gets people out there. But at the same time, there are many holes in this type of technology. Do we really trust it, or can we trust it? And then also, again, how many of you have had Siri or Cortana go off or Alexa go off and you have to be like, shut the hell up? Like, I didn't ask for the damn time. I understand it's 12:35 or 12:45 or like, quit freaking. I don't care what the weather is in Cupertino, California. What the hell do I care? So
Google Assistant constantly wants to be recording me when I use the Maps feature. I don't know why. It's like, oh, have you said something? Cool, we're going to send you this audio. I'm like, I didn't say shit.
Yeah, so it's like, if it's having those type of issues, do we really trust it to even be able to successfully tell reporters when there's an issue and what that issue actually is? Or will it just go off at everything and just go, no, this is incorrect, or just assume everything is correct when there is actually an issue? So that's something to think about as well. We already have frustrations with AI, and now we want to implement it into much larger things that impact how we live and what information we take in and decide to believe in our understanding of the world.
Well, Touch Me Nancy brings up a good point. The more intelligent we make AI, the less intelligent we become. Well, it's going back to that, to what we were talking about earlier, where we are pretty lazy, right? And the more tools that we build to help us, we have to be careful that these tools don't make us like complacent or stagnant in our knowledge and common sense and intelligence, right? Because at some point, we're not going to be able to fix if anything ever breaks, right? Like, I don't know how to fix my car. Not that I knew before, but it's getting harder now for mechanics, actually, because there's so many computerized parts in cars that you really just need a computer science degree and and knowledge of how cars work at the same time to be able to fix newer cars, right? So, we get to the point where someone's gonna, like, the more robots we build, right? And if robots are building robots, and then you kind of go down that spiral into the future where everything is just so advanced, and we're over here, we can't freaking even pick up building blocks because all we're doing is swiping. We can't even hold up a tool, to go like get a screwdriver to fix what's broken. It's I don't know, that's horrifying to me now. That's a novel I would like to read.
Yeah, and Acer says it's also about instant gratification. We can get what we want with the AI without having to wait, more or less. So again, I could say, hey Siri, or okay Google, how do I get to Cupertino? And again, as also Touch Me Nancy says, society will be like WALL-E, which of course Tatiana has a little WALL-E figurine in the camera there, but it's true. It's going to be too much reliance on these factors, and we're just going to assume, oh, well, they're going to do their job. Well, folks, we've said that about politicians and our government and about many other things in the U.S. And guess what? Most of us can probably agree that ain't the case. And so we've put too much reliance in people. Now we want to do that in AI. I don't know if that's the right thing to do, to be honest with you. Especially without the proper checks and balances. And I do understand there are journalists out there, they're feeding them the information. But anything can happen with that information once it gets sent to that AI.
Yeah, and I feel like with a bot too, because it can do the writing or the work way faster than a human, it can also disseminate that information out faster. So let's say, a reporter writes something, they publish it in a newspaper, and then, they found out that's wrong, and then they publish a retraction. Like, all of that stuff takes time, but it's could potentially be contained because everything is sort of just moving at a slower pace. But if that bot is now disseminating that same information to hundreds, thousands of different places and writing that wrong information in 100 different articles in 100 different ways, is a lot harder to contain that wrong information as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's going to be tougher the more that we try to make things more efficient, more effective, faster, stronger, better.
Oh, yeah.
Have more people see it.
It's a Silicon Valley slogan.
Yeah, it's going to be harder to backtrack and go, oh shit, we screwed up. Oh shit, we need to fix this. Because that fire just became a full-on dumpster fire, and there's nothing you can do about it now. You just got to let it burn out, right? Like, what are you going to do at that point when everything's on fire? You become that cartoon dog or whatever at the table going, yeah, everything's fine. Whole house is burning down. Everything's fine. This looks great. This is great.
This is fine. This is fine. And not to leave you with a horrendous view of our future by any means, because it is through technology and through innovation that we are actually able to speak with you guys today and be able to interact from all over the world and connect and find, meaningful connections and conversations. So we're definitely very thankful for all that. But as we mentioned before, we just have to be careful what we do with it. Technology, AI, everything is just a tool, and it's up to us to wield that tool correctly, efficiently.
Exactly. And that is the main core of this show, is to try to get all these perspectives out there and let you have the information research so you can go out into the world and do as you feel needs to be done. That's really the core of it. And so, with our show, again, left brain topics, right brain topics, there's so much being pushed out there. We hopefully work as a filter. And again, we can be wrong on certain things too, or perspectives, but we at least let you know this is a perspective, or this is actual fact, or you know what? There isn't a lot of fact or grounds to believe this, so maybe this is something that you take with a grain of salt. And that's really our focus here. And so we want to thank you for supporting us by being here, by listening if you're listening to us on iTunes or Podbean, or by being here on Twitch, whether you're working and lurking or you're actually chatting away and letting us know your thoughts and feelings on the subjects. We thank you very much. Again, all that helps support us so we can put out more great content, whether it's a game stream, an interview, special videos that we have on our YouTube channel, which, by the way, we are launching another one today as of Wednesday, February 28th. We will be launching a brand new highlight reel, some of the best from our talk shows and from some of our game streams. So if you're just kind of catching up to us and coming across us, make sure to check that out. That way you can get a full sense of what we're all about and everything that we do. And, thank you all, because we have also met many of our February goals for followers and subscribers and for support. Because again, our goal is to do this full time and give you as much content as possible that really helps positively impact your life and motivates you, educates you, and just makes you feel good, right? So that's where a lot of the game streams come in, just having fun, joking around, getting away from all the craziness that is life sometimes, and joining us here on Twitch or on YouTube. So thank you so much for all of you today and for all of your support thus far. If you want more information, or you want to let us know about some of the topics that you've loved or some topics you'd like to hear about, make sure to visit our website, mindminepod.com. Otherwise, you can check us out on Instagram or Twitter, which is at MindMineTV. You'll be able to find us on there where you can tweet at us or message us or comment on an image and let us know your thoughts. If you have questions or you want more elaboration on a topic, that's what we want to hear from you, because, again, this show is about you, the listener/watcher.
Indeed. And if you're on YouTube, remember, even a downvote counts as engagement, so that's fine. Do it up. It's okay. We'll take it.
So, once again, thank you, everyone. This has been a great show. Lots of fun. Again, talking with all of you, making this more of a conversation. And also, if you're around on the Twitcherverse, make sure to join us tomorrow. For tomorrow is Thursday Wars Days, where we play World of Warcraft. And on Friday, Fighting Fridays, where we will be hopefully finishing up Doom by id Software and Bethesda Games. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure to check it out. Or if you're on Podbean, again, make sure to subscribe. Let us know, give us a review, and let us know your thoughts on the podcast and how much you enjoy it and what questions you have for us. So until then, have an awesome week, everyone. A fantastic rest of your Wednesdays, and stay sane. That's all we can say. Have a good one.
Bye, guys.